Hello everyone, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club and welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to continue with episode 2 of our playthrough of Fire in the Sky, and we're playing scenario 3, from Pearl Harbor to the Battle of Midway. Now, as a testament to this game, I'll just let the viewers know I spent probably 2.5 to 3 hours plotting Japan's turn 2 moves. And that's a testament to the depth of this game, especially the logistics of this. And you're looking at the forward bases that you have, their capacities. You're looking at Japanese transport limitations and Japanese oil, and you're trying to balance all of those things and in an attempt to try to get the victory points that you need to win. And these are the type of games that I truly enjoy, is when you can spend 2.5 to 3 hours planning a turn, and that shows you the depth of what you're able to accomplish with this board game. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, following our great success during turn 1, Japan has managed to get 26 victory points, which is pretty good. We need to get a total of 35 or greater to win this scenario. So far, we've got General MacArthur and his 6th Army on their heels in Manila, and General Aida's force in Bangkok is going to be moving into Rangoon this turn. We're also going to have General Yamashita's 25th Army doing an amphibious invasion in Singapore. And we'll see if we can push Percival out of Singapore. We're also going to be reinforcing our position in Leh with another Japanese division. And we're going to set ourselves up for turn 3 for a push on Port Moresby. I'm also plotting an amphibious invasion of Guadalcanal. We'd like to get in there and secure that before the United States can just move forces in there and entrench. One operation I considered, but I decided against it, the logistics would have been too great, is to target Ellis. This would be very, very powerful in Japan's hands if we could secure that. Reason being is that it is exactly 4 spaces from Pearl Harbor, and generally the U.S. will use that as a transition point in bringing their carrier forces to the South Seas. And control of Ellis by Japan would be huge. The problem is the logistics would be enormous. We would have to suspend a lot of our other operations in order to do that. So I've decided against it, but we're going to be making a push on Guadalcanal during this turn. Singapore and Rangoon, those will be the big 3. And incidentally, how I do my planning in this game is, what I'll do is I'll start out by selecting my major points for the operation phase. I work my way backwards. So as an example, I determined that I need to go after Singapore, Rangoon, and Guadalcanal. So I work backwards from that. The first step is, well, I need a Guadalcanal invasion force. Where can I get that from? Well, probably from truck. And then that means, well, what do I do during the first deployments? I've got to get forces into truck to be able to make that deployment during the operations phase. So you kind of work backwards, and then using a pencil where you can erase, you keep making changes to your planned operations, trying to squeeze out transportation points and oil points to the best of your ability. But these are the type of games that I just love, is when you can get that deep into the sausage making process. All right, it's the Japanese portion of turn 2, and we're going to begin with the economic phase. Japan has reserved 8 transport points, and we're going to use those 8 transport points to transport 8 oil back from Brunei back to the home islands. So we're going to reduce our transport capability to 0, but we're going to increase our oil in the strategic reserve by 8. So that'll move us from 30 oil up to 38. We would also at this time be able to transfer destroyer assets to our convoy escort box. I'm going to pass on doing that. Next step now is our reinforcement phase. Japan, during turn 2, will be getting 2 squadrons of land-based aircraft, and we're going to place those in Kore. Japan will also now reset their transport and sub points. Japan will move their sub points up to 2 and their transport points up to the merchantman counter, which right now is at 58. So we've got 58 transport. And now we'll move on to our first deployments. First step is going to be to move 4 air points from Saigon into Bangkok, and those forces are going to support our attack on Rangoon. So we're going to transfer 4 air points using a 1-hex deployment to Bangkok. Bangkok has an air capacity of 4, so we're within limits there. It costs no transport. Next, we're going to transfer 2 air points from Formosa to Saigon. We're not going to need that much air cover over Manila, so we're going to transfer 2 air points from Formosa to Saigon, and that will cost us 2 transport points. We're also going to be transferring 2 air points from Formosa to Truk Lagoon, and they're going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, bringing that up to a total of 4 air points. We have an 8 air point capacity there. That will also cost 2 transport. Then we're going to transfer the 2 air points that we just produced in Kure, and those are going to be transported to Rabaul. And that'll take 2 jumps. So we're going to move 2 air points to Truk and then the 2 air points onto Rabaul. That's going to cost us 4 transport. Then the 2 air points we have in the Marshall Islands, we're going to transfer to the Gilberts. That is a 1-hex deployment. It costs no transport points. Then we're going to do a 2 air point transfer from Formosa to the Marianas onto Wake Island. So that'll be a double move, 3 movement points to Marianas and 3 to Wake. That'll cost us 4 transport points. We need to make sure that we've got air cover on those new conquests in the Gilberts and Wake, because the U.S. can make amphib operations during this turn. Next, we're going to transfer 2 air points from Truk to Rabaul, and that will cost us 2 transport points. We're going to move the cruiser Tone from Okinawa into Formosa. That is a 1-hex deployment, and that will cost no transport. Then we're going to transfer the 43rd Division from Kure to Leh, and that is going to cost us 8 points. 1, 2, 3, 4 to Palau, and then 2 more points into Leh. So we've got a total of 8 strength points there. That cost us 8 transport. We're going to make another 1-hex deployment, and we're going to transfer the light carrier Zuiho, the fleet carrier Hiru, and 2 destroyers from Palau to Truk. And that will cost us no points because that is a 1-hex deployment. Then we're going to transfer the 6th Infantry Division from Kure, and that is going to end up going to Truk, and that will form our Guadalcanal invasion force. So that'll be a 4-hex movement into Truk, costing us 4 transport points. We're also going to include a cruiser and a destroyer in that force, and that will also come along, and that's going to cost us an extra 3 transport. So the total transport on that will be 7. And then we're going to transfer 2 destroyers from Kure to Yokosuka. That'll be a 1-hex deployment, costing us 0 transport. And then finally, we're going to transfer 2 cruisers and a destroyer from Kure to Truk Lagoon. That'll cost a total of 5 points, and that'll be moved 4 movement points into Truk. So we built up a large naval force in Truk. Truk has an unlimited capacity for naval vessels. And that cost us a total of 5 transport points. We're down to 24 transport. And finally, we're going to move General Aida's 15th Army from Bangkok into Rangoon. And he's going to launch an attack on the British 17th Division there. That's a 1-hex deployment, no transport. And that is going to complete Japan's first deployment. We'll move on to operational movement. Now moving on to the operations phase, we're going to do an amphibious invasion using Yamashita's 25th Army, supported by a cruiser and destroyer from Hainan to Singapore. And that force is going to move 3 movement points into Singapore. It's going to cost us a massive 16 transport and 3 oil. Then we're going to form a task force in Hainan. That'll be a destroyer, and that's going to move to Rangoon. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movement points. So that's going to cost us 1.5 times the normal oil. So in this case, it would be 1 times 1.5 is 1.5. We round it up to 2. That'll cost us 2 oil. And that force is going to serve to deny the 17th Division supplies. Now moving on to the South Pacific, we're going to set up 2 fleets in Truk Lagoon. One will be an invasion force, the other will be a carrier support group. We'll start out with the invasion force, and we're going to create a force of the 6th Division, supported with a cruiser and destroyer. So we'll get a cruiser and a destroyer out. And they're going to move to Guadalcanal. It'll cost us a total of 8 transport and 3 oil. And they will move to Guadalcanal. We have to be careful because Halsey has a carrier group down in Noumea. He could intercept us. So that's the purpose of having the next group assembled, and that's going to be the fleet carrier Hiru, cruiser and destroyer. It'll cost us 6 oil. And we'll get those forces out. Those forces will be activated, and we're going to move them into Guadalcanal. So if Halsey responds, we have a carrier group there, and we're also going to have some land-based long-range aircraft from Rabaul. So following all of these moves now, we have 0 transport available and 24 oil points. The Singapore invasion force is also going to be designated as the Tokyo Express. We're going to use the Tokyo Express counter there. Now we'll move on to the Allied reaction phase, and they really have only 2 viable forces that the Allies can use to counter these Japanese moves. We have the Dutch force in Surabaya. They could sortie and attempt to interfere with the landings in Singapore, although Tokyo Express counter would be a little tough to deal with. They also have Bull Halsey's force in Noumea with the carrier battle group. They could sail forth and attempt to interfere with the Guadalcanal landings, possibly supported by the Australian Perth. I'm going to be making rolls using the Oracle, and I'll find out if the Allies will be responding in any of those 2 ways. And the Allies have elected to not respond, and I think that's probably proper. If Halsey was to respond into Guadalcanal, he's going to be facing the elite pilots from Hiru, along with land-based aircraft from Rabaul. And I don't think that that's going to work out real well for him, seeing as it's the only carrier battle group that is in the Pacific right now. The Dutch, when you combine the Tokyo Express with the Long Lance torpedoes, the Dutch really have very little chance of resisting that. So I think that was probably a smart move on their part. Now we'll move on to our air commitment phase. We're going to commit 4 air factors from Bangkok into the Rabaul sector, and they're going to provide air cover for our 15th Army. Same thing will happen in Saigon. We're going to commit a total of 6 air points over the Singapore operation. And then we'll commit 2 air points from Formosa into the cleanup operation in Manila. And finally, since the U.S. decided not to respond in Guadalcanal, we're going to send 4 air points to attack the air bases in Port Moresby. And now we'll move on to our combat phase. I think we'll start in Southeast Asia in Rangoon. We'll begin the combat phase with the submarine attack segment. Each side can allocate submarine assets to any of the fleets that have been moved on the board. Japan has no ability to use their submarines as the U.S. hasn't formed any fleets. The Allies, though, could use their subpoints either in merchant attack, or they could target some of these forces with submarine attacks, see if they can maybe pick off a carrier or something. Now during turn 2, the Allies have a -1 modifier to their sub-attacks versus fleets. So they have no ability to stop any of the landings as these forces are too large for a single submarine to affect, but they could target possibly Hiru with a sub-attack. And the U.S. has elected to use one of their sub-points for tactical attack on the Guadalcanal force. The U.S. has elected to try to attack the carrier support group consisting of the Hiru, a cruiser, and a destroyer. Japan is going to conduct their ASW using their destroyer forces, and they're going to gain a +1 because we have a carrier in that task force. So the Japanese destroyer forces are going to seek out the U.S. submarines. Here's the roll. The result is a 2. It's modified to a 3, and they have not found the tactical subs. So the U.S. submarine is going to have a firing solution. They're going to target Hiru. So the U.S. subs have a firing solution on Hiru. And this is going to be at a -1 modifier. U.S. submarines have a -1 modifier during turns 2 through 5. And that has to do with their torpedo problems that they had, not to mention that they're still using a large portion of their World War I S-boats. Okay, here is the roll, -1. So in effect, they need a 6 to hit the Hiru. They rolled a 4. It's modified to a 3, and that's a miss. Submarine limps away, unsuccessful. That'll complete the submarine attack sequence, and we'll move on to the battle segments. And we're going to start with Southeast Asia and the attack on Rangoon. So we've set up the forces for the attack on Rangoon. Japan has their 15th Army under the command of Aida. They have a destroyer in the bombardment box and 4 points of long-range aircraft, which will equate to 2 air points. British have none, so that's going to give air supremacy to the Japanese. As Japan has air supremacy, there will be no air combat. So they'll have 2 strike aircraft, which they're going to apply to airstrikes against the 17th Division. Japan is going to move their destroyer into the sea control box, denying supply to the British. Japan will be in supply. We're going to make our ground support rolls. We have 2 Japanese strike aircraft going after the 17th Division. As we have air supremacy and we have aircraft involved in the ground support, we're going to gain a +1 modifier. Here's the roll. We rolled a 5 and a 2, so that will be modified to a 6. And that's going to be 1 hit on the 17th Division. The aircraft will fly back to their bases in Bangkok. Now we'll conduct our ground combat, and the Japanese 15th Army is in supply. They'll be rolling 8 dice. Here is the roll. And they have a total of 2 hits. So we will mark the 17th Division with 2 hits. Now the British will counterattack with a strength of 4, but they're unsupplied. So they're only going to be hitting on 6s. And here's the British counterattack. They have no hits. So Aida's 15th Army is undamaged. British 17th has taken 3 hits, and that is going to reduce them. It's not enough to destroy them. We would have needed a total of 5. In order to destroy them outright, it would be 1 greater than the total and any hits that they might have scored. So in this case, we would have needed a total of 5 hits to destroy the 17th Division. As it stands now, they are reduced. Next is General Yamashita's 25th Army attacking Malaya Command in Singapore. We'll set it up on the battle board. All right, the Battle of Singapore has been set up on the battle board. We have General Yamashita's 25th Army on transports, and they are escorted by a cruiser and destroyer under the Tokyo Express counter. Malaya Command consists of Percival's Malayan Army and 6 factors of Japanese long-range aircraft from Saigon, giving them 3 air points and air supremacy. The RAF is not present, so Japan will have 3 strike aircraft that they're going to use against Malaya Command. Japanese destroyers will move into the sea control box, denying Percival supply, and we're going to land Yamashita's 25th Army in Singapore. Japan has a total of 3 strike aircraft and the gunnery strength of the Miyoko. So we're going to be rolling 4 dice. We'll be gaining a +1 because of the air supremacy. We'll see if we can get any hits on Malaya Command. Here's the roll. And they have a total of 2 hits. They've garnered 2 hits, and we will mark 2 hits on Malaya Command. These planes will fly back to Saigon. Now we're going to move on to our ground combat phase. Japanese are in supply. Percival is unsupplied. So Japan will roll 8 dice, looking for 5s and 6s. And they've done quite a few hits. They've got 1, 2, 3. Total of 3 hits on the Malayan Army. We'll mark them accordingly. Hits. Now, British Malayan Army will counterattack with 8 dice, but they're going to only be hitting on 6s. They're unsupplied. And they've totaled 2 hits. 2 hits would be placed on Yamashita's army, and the British will lose 5-2. That is going to reduce Malaya Command. And the battle is over. Percival has his back to the wall. Next, we're going to resolve our Guadalcanal invasion. This will be an unopposed landing. So, the 6th Division is going to be, the destroyers will take control of the sea, and the 6th Division will land occupying Guadalcanal. Next, we're going to resolve our air attack on Port Moresby from long-range aircraft in Rabaul. We'll set it up on the battle board. All right, the Japanese air attack on Port Moresby from Rabaul will consist of 4 long-range aircraft, giving them 2 air points. The Royal Australian Air Force has 1 air point, and we've marked them accordingly. We're going to begin with our air combat. Port Moresby has anti-aircraft capability. They have a capability of 2, so they'll be rolling 2 dice for anti-aircraft. And they have no hits. They've rolled 2 and a 2. So now we're going to resolve our air-to-air combat. Japanese will be rolling 2 dice, and the Royal Australian Air Force 1. Here is the roll. And none of them have any hits. There are no hits. So we are going to have, Japan has 2 air points, they have 1. Japan will have air superiority. Japan is going to use their 2 strike aircraft to attack the Royal Australian Air Force on the ground. As Japan only has air superiority, they don't get any combat modifiers, so they will be rolling 2 dice for the attack. Here's the roll. They have 2 1s. So no damage was done on the Australian Air Force. Those forces will fly back, and that will end the battle. And finally, we'll move on to General MacArthur's beleaguered 6th Army in Manila, and we'll see if General Hama's 14th Army can force a surrender. All right, we have General Hama's 14th Army attacking the damaged 6th Army under command of MacArthur. Japan has 2 long-range aircraft coming from Formosa that will equate to 1 air point, giving Japan air supremacy. Japan has 1 air point which they're going to use for ground attack. Manila can now use its anti-aircraft, and they have an AA rating of 4, so they'll be rolling 4 dice. Here is the roll. And they have 3 hits, so that's going to knock out any ground support against his 6th Army, and we'll go to ground combat. Hama is in supply. We have to trace this manually back to the home islands, as no one has sea control. MacArthur, his supply lines are cut. So, General Hama will roll 8 dice, and as he's in supply, he will be able to hit on 5s and 6s. Here is the attack. He has a total of 2 hits. And we'll mark General MacArthur with 2 hits. Now MacArthur will counterattack. He has 4 strength points, and he'll only be hitting on 6s. And here is MacArthur's counterattack in Bataan. He has no hits. So, General Hama has forced the surrender of MacArthur, and his 6th Army is going to be destroyed. MacArthur will escape by PT boat to Australia. Roosevelt does not want him captured. Next up is the return to base phase, and we're going to send all of the active Japanese naval forces back to Korea. Japan will now move on to its 2nd deployment, but they have no transport points available, so there will be no 2nd deployment. What we have done is in truck, we have the Zuiho and Shoho, a destroyer, and a cruiser available in truck to respond to any American moves during their half of the turn. We'll move on to the end phase, and Japan is going to take Manila, and that is worth 3 victory points, moving our victory point token up to 29. In addition, they're going to also take control of Guadalcanal, worth 1 victory point. That's going to give us a total of 30. We're still awaiting resolution of the battles in Singapore and Bangkok, but those will more than likely be resolved next turn. And that's going to complete Japan's turn 2. We'll move on to the Allies portion of turn 2. We'll begin with their economic phase. The United States has 1 subpoint remaining, so they're going to commit that subpoint to attacking Japanese merchant shipping. There are no Japanese destroyers in the convoy box. And in this scenario, it won't become apparent, but if you're playing the full game, once the U.S. gets their Gato-class submarines, they are going to be wreaking havoc on the Japanese merchantmen, reducing Japanese merchantmen, and in turn reducing their transport capacity. And this forces Japan to allocate destroyer assets to protecting those convoys, and in turn burning precious oil in the process. Every time you do an ASW roll in the convoy box, Japan has to burn an oil point. So it's a double-edged sword for them. All right, the Americans will make their attack on the merchant shipping. There are no modifiers to this roll, so on a 5 or 6, they will score a hit. Here's the roll. He rolled a 5, and that is going to damage 2 points of Japanese merchantmen, moving them down to 56. We'll move on to the reinforcement phase. The United States is going to gain back the Nevada, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. Those will have been repaired, along with the 1st Marine Division, the Yorktown and Enterprise, Cruiser Portland, Light Cruiser Anti-Aircraft Atlanta, and a destroyer flotilla. British are going to gain 2 points of land-based aircraft, the 23rd Division, the Hermes, and a C-class destroyer will be returned. In addition, U.S. subpoints are reset to 2, and U.S. will have 28 transport points, and we will mark them accordingly. British transport points are reset to 12. U.S. reinforcements will appear on the west coast. British reinforcements will appear in the Indian Ocean ports. Allies are going to exercise their free move, and they're going to transfer British forces to Bombay and the U.S. forces to Pearl. And now we'll move on to the U.S. and British first deployment phase. Also, as a part of the reinforcement phase, the British are going to take a 4-point and a 2-point replacement marker. Their attempts to maybe resupply Rangoon and Singapore. In Southeast Asia, Britain is going to redeploy the aircraft they have in Bombay, and they're going to move them to Calcutta. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to cost them 2 transport, moving them down to 10. U.S. was considering an amphibious invasion of Wake Island, but they have instead elected to attempt to retake Guadalcanal. They're going to move the 1st Marine Division from Pearl Harbor to Noumea. It's going to cost 4 points and 4 points. So that'll be 8 transport, moving them down to 20. U.S. is also going to move a carrier battle group to Noumea, consisting of the Yorktown and Enterprise, the Atlanta, and a destroyer. That's 7 transport points, and they have to do that move twice. So that'll be 14 total, moving them down to 6 transport remaining. And finally, they're going to move 2 air points from Pearl Harbor to Espiritu Santo. That's going to cost them 4 points. 2 points to Ellis and 2 points to Espiritu Santo. It's going to give them an AZOC around that base, and they might even be able to have some long-range aircraft setting them up for the invasion of Guadalcanal. The United States is not going to invade this turn. They simply don't have the transports to accomplish it. U.S. transports are now at 2 points. And lastly, the U.S. is going to move the cruiser Portland from Pearl Harbor 4 movement points to Ellis. It's going to cost them their last 2 transport. We move on to the operational phase, and British would like to try to resupply Rangoon. They know that the Japanese have no forces within 4 hexes of Rangoon, so they won't be able to intercept that other than with submarines. The problem is, in order to land forces in a contested space, we have to take sea control to land those replacements. So that would mean that the C-class destroyers would have to move along with the replacements, and the Hermes would have to move unescorted. So I think we'll leave the Hermes behind, and we're going to form a task force of the replacement point and a C-class destroyer. And they're going to move 4 movement points, 1, 2, 3, 4, into Rangoon. Japanese have no forces in range. They have the battleship Congo, but it is not within the maximum range of that to interfere with those landings. They would have had to have moved forces into Saigon or Brunei in order to have range to reach Rangoon, and they don't. And that is going to cost the British a total of 4 transport points, and we'll move them down to 6. We'll move on to the Japanese reaction phase, and there will be no Japanese reaction at this time. We'll move on to the air commitment phase, and the British are going to commit their 2 air points in Calcutta to Rangoon. We'll move on to the combat step, and we will set that up on the battle board. All right, we'll begin the combat step with submarine attack sequence. The Japanese have 2 subpoints, and they're going to commit one of those to attack the resupply convoy from Bombay. The Japanese are going to target the transports. Britain is going to use their C-class destroyers for anti-submarine warfare. Now, the British don't qualify for the +1 modifier for land-based air or carrier-based aircraft because these are long-range aircraft that the British are bringing into the battle, so they won't get the benefit for that. So we will make the roll for the ASW roll for the C-class destroyers. Here's the roll. Result is a 2. That's a miss. And the Japanese submarines are going to target those transports. They are going to gain a +1 because they're targeting an air or land unit in a task force. So here is the submarine attack on the British replacement transports. +1. Result is a 1, and that is a miss. So the Japanese tactical subs have failed. We'll move on to the battle segment. We have a reduced 17th Division, 2 points of long-range aircraft for the British. The RAF finally appears, giving them 1 air point and air supremacy. Japan has their 15th Army under Aida. So what will happen is the British are going to take control of the sea with their C-class destroyers, and they're going to land their replacement points, rejuvenating the British 17th Division. British have 1 air point, and they're going to commit that to ground support against Aida's 15th Army. So they'll be getting 1 die roll, and they'll be earning +1. They have air supremacy. So here is the ground support roll. Result is a 5. That's modified to a 6, and that's going to cause 1 point of damage to Aida's 15th Army. Now we'll do our ground combat. British 17th Division is going to counterattack. They'll have 4 dice to roll. And they are in supply. Japanese are unsupplied. Here is the roll. And they've scored a total of 3 hits. That is amazing. This could be a problem here. So we're going to mark 3 hits on 15th Army. 15th Army is going to roll 8 dice, and they will be getting hits only on 6s. Here's Aida's counterattack. And he has a top die here. We'll roll that. He's got 4 hits. That is amazing. He scored 4 hits. That's going to do 4 points of damage to the British. We'll mark them with 4 points of damage. And that saved the 15th Army from being reduced. We have 4 hits on either side. In this case, nothing will happen. The attackers have to be greater than the defenders in order to cause the hit. So in this case, we have no change in the situation other than the British are now resupplied. 17th Division is back to fighting fit. That will complete the combat step. We have no other forces that are eligible for combat. Malaya Command is reduced and they can't launch any attacks. So that will end the combat phase. We'll move on to the return to base phase. Now what's interesting, there is a rule, 15.5, called British Oriental Fleet. It says at the start of the game, British naval units return to Singapore during the return to base phase instead of the Indian Ocean ports off map box. If the Japanese ever place an occupied base marker in Singapore, then for the rest of the game, British naval units return to their home base as usual during the return to base phase. Singapore is marked by a pentagon with a British flag inside, but it is not a home base. So in this case, the British destroyers would have to move to Singapore, which is kind of unusual, but that's what the rule is stating. So I guess we're going to have to do that. The Allies will now move on to the second deployment phase. British have 6 transport points left. And I think what they're going to do is they will move their 23rd Division from Bombay, spending 4 transport to move them into Ceylon. They'll use up 4 points. They have 2 remaining. And I think they're going to move the Hermes for 1 point, transferring that to Ceylon as well. And we'll move on to the end phase. U.S. has not recovered any bases, so no points will change hands. Japanese have 30 victory points. And once again, if Japan can finish the game with greater than 35 victory points, they're going to win the game. If it is less than 35, it'll be an Allied victory. Otherwise, it'll be a draw. And we are going to also have some points scored for sunk or damaged carriers. So the British 4-point replacement that was in Bombay is going to be removed. They never got a chance to use that. But we do have contested control in Rangoon and contested control in Singapore. So this third and final turn will be very interesting. So that's going to bring this video to a close, and we'll recap or regroup rather for our next video, which will be turn 3, and that'll be the conclusion of this series. And we'll see if Japan can get a victory in scenario 3. This is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club, thanking everyone for tuning into the channel, and I hope to see you next time for episode 3 of Fire in the Sky. Thanks for watching, and I hope everyone has a pleasant evening. Good night.